Not all stories begin once upon a time, and not all stories happened a long time ago. In fact, this one happened quite recently. It was Halloween night, and a group of young people, dressed in their costumes, had gathered for a party. As usually is the case, they had begun to tell stories designed to scare one another. Eventually, the talk came around to the fear that each of them had felt in passing the graveyard on their way to the party. One of the young men said, "You have to make sure that you don't ever stand on the grave at midnight, because if you do, the body will reach up and grab you and pull you down inside." Now, one girl, dressed as a princess in a long flowing dress that went all the way down to the floor, said,
"Don't be silly. I don't believe in ghosts. I've never seen a ghost, and I wouldn't be afraid to go into the graveyard at midnight and stand on the grave. That's silly superstition."
The young man was quite upset that the girl didn't believe what he had said, and so he dared the young girl, whose name was Trish, to prove this very night that she wasn't afraid to go to the graveyard and at midnight to stand on the grave. As the time was growing late, a group soon left and made their way down towards the graveyard. Before they left, Trish put on her long cloak that was part of her costume, and they worked their way down the street toward the cemetery. As they reached the gate, one of the boys handed Trish a fork from the kitchen. "Here, take this. When you stood on the grave, stick it into the ground so that we'll be able to see, and we'll have proof that you did stand on the grave at midnight." Trish left the group at the gate and went inside. In the darkness, for the first time, she began to feel a little bit afraid. Wasn't that a movement she caught out the corner of her eye? She almost broke thin and ran outside, but she was determined to see this through. She walked forward till she found a grave. She stood on the grave. She raised the fork, ready to plunge it into the ground, when she was certain that she heard a noise behind her. First, a sigh, and then a loud moan. And it came from a grave not far away. Now she was sure that she could hear something approaching, moving stiffly and wetly through the darkness. She was too frightened to scream. She plunged the fork into the ground and turned around, but she was unable. Something had caught hold of her, and she struggled and struggled to gain her freedom. The more she struggled, the tighter it held her. Now it was tugging at her throat. In a final spasm of terror, she threw herself forward onto the ground, only to feel herself being dragged backward toward the grave. And then it was only blackness. Trish's friends waited outside the gate, and with Trish had not come back in half an hour, they decided that they better go in and look for her. Armed with a flashlight, they went into the cemetery, and there was Trish lying on the grave. And when they touched her and lifted her up, they realized that she had only fainted. The end of her cloak was embedded in the ground, held fast in place by the fork she had plunged into the grave. Trish wasn't as brave as she had thought herself to be. Happy Halloween, everyone.